Please welcome Connect Ventures Managing Partner, Pietro Bieza, Index Ventures Partner, Georgia Stevenson, Our.Space Co-founder and CMO, Stephanie Boyker, and PurpleDot's CEO and co-founder, Madeline Parra.
Hello, this is lovely. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here. It's a siesta time, I guess. I've been told by the SaaStr organizer that this session have had a lot of registration and interest. I suspect because of the topic we are discussing today is product-led growth and product, what is more paramount, who is king and who is King Kong. But I'm sure also because of the three guests and panelists, I am the fortune to share the panel today. So Madeline, Stephanie, and Georgia, thank you for being here. Why don't we kick off with a brief intro, each of you, and just as a tagline, what is your most favorite product SaaS and why? Yeah, Madeline, you can have to go.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Madeline. I'm a two-time founder. So my first startup was a startup called Swazoo. We did social reviews and user-generated content based on what people are saying on Twitter and Instagram. We exited to Skyscanner, and I am now on my second startup called PurpleDot. We power pre-orders for top e-commerce and retail brands like Mattel, French Connection, Tala, if there's any Gen Z in the audience. And both of these startups are B2B2C. So for the last 10 years, I've been pretty obsessed with the B2B2C space. And I think it has a lot of interesting usage of the product-led growth trifecta that we'll be talking about today. So I'm excited to share some of our experiences and do's and don'ts in that space. My favorite SaaS tool that leverages PLG. I've recently come across a tool called Crossbeam. I don't know if you've heard of it, but what Crossbeam does is it makes it really easy to understand whether a partnership opportunity makes sense between your company and another company. I think it's brilliant because you basically both upload your CRM, you understand like which audience or which segments you want to share, and it spits out what they think the shared revenue opportunity could be or the shared referral opportunity could be. And this is something that with our first startup, Swazoo, I would have loved to have because sometimes it's hard to understand if a partnership is going to be worth it or not. So that is my favorite SaaS tool is Crossbeam right now.
Thank you. Stephanie?
Cool, thanks. I'll check it out. Hi, I'm Stephanie Boyker. I'm one of the three co-founders of Our.Space. And what we're doing at Our.Space is we're building a collaborative workforce planning to help everyone in the company navigate who works on what in every shape that teams are formed. But before Our.Space, I worked across product, marketing, and growth from pre-seed to public companies, most recently being at Spendesk, the spend management platform here in Europe, where I built and scaled the marketing team from 1 to 50 million. We started in the context of sales-led, moved over to product-led, mostly really enabled by our efforts around the community, as we really invested a lot in building CFO Connect, which was our active community of 10,000 financial leaders. And I'm really happy to be part of the Connect portfolio and talking about PLG today, as I do believe it's just something that every company has to implement, whether or not. It's not how, but when. And favorite SaaS tool. So I think my newest favorite SaaS tool is Pitch. As someone who just really values storytelling, communication, I think it's really enabled everyone to be good at slides instead of just relying on marketing to be good at slides. And so I think it's, in addition to being a really great, easy-use tool, I think they've implemented really great product-led growth motions from their easy adoption, and I think they have just a really fantastic way for monetization as well. It feels very simple, and you don't really feel like you're being charged, but you're just getting value as you go. So I love Pitch.
Thank you. Georgia?
Thanks, Pietro.
You're on.
Sorry, I can't help. It feels like we're on The Apprentice here. You know, it's like the behind the desk. I'm competing with two founders. I'm already
loving it.
A little bit nervous, but nice to meet everyone. I'm Georgia. I'm a partner at Index Ventures. Index is very much a multi-stage investor, so we invest in everything from seed, venture, and growth, and beyond that. We're a fund that was born out of Europe about 25 years ago, and a dual headquartered in US and Europe. And are lucky to have a lot of, I would say, product-led growth companies within our portfolio. So Pitch is one of them, as well as things like Notion, like Figma, like Discord, and a bunch of others. In terms of my favorite product-led growth company, I'm biased because I work super closely with them, but Linktree definitely comes to mind. So Linktree is a platform that enables creators to essentially link everything they are across the internet. So the more that we express ourselves on different channels, different types of content, different social networks, Linktree is a way for creators to bring their different identities and profiles all together and enable their audience to kind of cross-convert and cross-engage. So that's
I love it, and is in my email signature.
Nice.
There we go. What has qualified me actually to be the behind the desk as like product-led growth trifecta? I guess the answer is like, so my background is a marketer, and I've been a founder of a product-led company. And now with Connect Ventures, we are a seed VC. We invest in very product-led companies. And of course, behind our product-led, there is also product company, there's also a product-led engine for growth is where the great things happen. And so the big debate, I'm starting opening the conversation with you and afterward with the audience, is the dichotomy, classic conversation between what is biggest, what actually drives the most value creation in venture. Is product or actually is distribution? And in this case, is product-led growth distribution. So I would like to kick off just very high level, like again, product distribution or product go-to-market. What is king and what is King Kong in your experience? And then we can deep dive into the product-led growth trifecta. Maybe we change the order. We go from Stephanie now.
Yeah, sure. Well, I guess in this first analogy, I hope product-led growth is not King Kong because he dies.
There we go.
I'm hoping. I believe.
First opinion.
Yeah, I believe product-led will keep going. But in the trifecta, I think that that you've explained, we have the adoption, we have onboarding or adoption, distribution, adoption, and expansion. I mean, I strongly believe that adoption is the one that is just undisputable, that companies have to implement. I think distribution, it really depends on the industry, the product, the market, and I don't believe that every product is capable of going bottoms up, even though I know a lot of investors push for it early on. I know it's something we've talked about, and I don't believe that's the one that everyone should invest in early on. So I'd say I believe that the adoption is really the most unavoidable and the most productizable part of the product-led growth motion.
Georgia, you take the question. I think before deep diving into the three elements that Stephanie introduced, I'd like to stay more on the more high level. What it takes to create a great SaaS outlier, right? Of course, both having a product that people love is the first things. But also, a lot of great things happen with it. You also have an opinionated product-led growth strategy. So, what do you think is, if you have to pick one, right? Like, what is the biggest levers or driver of force? Yeah, you start.
Yeah, so I think it's interesting. So we definitely love working with teams and with founders who are opinionated about product. I think when it comes to product-led growth, in some ways it can be distracting or detrimental to a business being built. So maybe to put that into example, I think one of the challenges with product-led growth is ultimately you are acquiring any customer that wants to use your product, which is a great thing, and it shows virality and it shows product love. But what it means is that once you have acquired them, they are there for a customer, and you are serving them as a customer when it comes to your roadmap, when it comes to your customer service, when it comes to the community that you're building. And I think probably everyone sort of in this room would agree that not all customers are created equal, and they have different types of value at different times for a business. So taking the example of Linktree, I mean, this was a product that was global from day one and very much cross-industry from day one. We had everything from celebrities, artists using the product, but also things like churches, like restaurants, like a whole bunch of diverse use cases. And obviously that's amazing and that's magical, and definitely it's a clear indicator of product market fit. But the challenge with that is when you are prioritizing what features to launch, when you are prioritizing what markets to start doing paid marketing in alongside this organic growth, you end up trying to cater for maybe 100 different types of customers, right? And often I think that's sometimes the trap, or for want of a better word, that sometimes product-led growth can drive to, where you end up taking on customers that actually you are not best suited to serve. So maybe as a counter, because I feel like always with panels it's better to disagree, but actually sometimes I think it can have a detrimental effect versus always being something that investors look for and want to see.
Disclosure, we agree to disagree on everything about product growth. And yes, I agree with you, Georgia, in Typeform, which has been kind of like defining investment for me, with them for 7 years, and it's a great example of a product-led growth company that also have a fantastic product. The uncontrollable results of the virality is actually you might end up onboarding customers and users that actually are not the one which actually as a business that you want to have. Madeleine, you are a product person first.
Yeah.
Now with PurpleDot, you also drive the go-to-market effort.
Yes.
So how do you think about the dichotomy about product and product-led growth?
Yeah, I mean, I think ideally, obviously, you always have both. But I would, and I know I'm biased on this, but I would always fundamentally start with the product strategy and the problems to be solved for your core customer. And then it's kind of, once I build that, it's not the build and they will come. So how do you embed within your product features that are both good for the customer and good for your growth? It can't be separate, in my opinion. But for me, I think if you have a product-led growth strategy before you have a product that you know solves a problem for your customers, you are at risk of what Georgia just said, which is not knowing who your customer is, attracting a lot of them, and actually it's not the problem you're trying to solve for them, et cetera, et cetera. So for me, I would always start with the product strategy first. What problems are you solving for your customers? And then say, okay, well, I've built it, but they're not just going to come and onboard themselves and all these types of things. But what features can I add to my product that naturally let it grow? Whether that's distribution, whether that's adoption, whether that's expansion. But yeah, for me, as a product person, I'm very strong on always start with a product, the problems you're solving first, and then figure out how you can embed growth tactics within that are also good for your customer. So yeah, that's my thoughts on it.
Excellent. And that things bridges well to, I think, the second topic, which is what is the definition of product growth, which I think all agree here is a very buzzy word, is a catch-all phrase is one, and for sure it's not a silver bullet, right? As per Georgia points, it's not as once you have it, all your business results are done. I think we can all agree about the definition, which is the ability for a business to grow purely as a result of the product being used. But I think the effort that we have done as a team, and also with a bit of thinking myself before, is actually product-led growth has to be unpacked in 3 different components, right? Otherwise, we all talk about product growth in boards, in strategy session, in conferences, but eventually it's easy to create confusion, right? Unless we really unpack and break down the product-led growth engines in 3 different components. The first is a product-led distribution, which is when the product markets itself. It creates a forced consumption. I use Linktree on my email. People want to know where on my social presence is. By clicking it forces to consume the Linktree. If I send a Calendly to schedule a meeting with me, the recipient is forced to use Calendly without being forced to become a customer, but for sure it's starting using and experience the product. That is the first component. The second one is product-led adoption, which is probably what the doctrine mostly accumulate product-led growth with, which is the bottom-up, self-serve motion of freemium product in B2B SaaS. The third one is what we call product-led expansion, and is where the product can expand itself within organization, again, without the need of an account manager to sign a new contract for 10 seats or for higher usage of the product, right? So, of course, when all these three elements are combined together and works, we reach the PLG trifecta, which is the SaaS heaven. And so I'd like to, again, grab back to our panelists. How do you have experienced differently these three components, right? I'd like to start with Stephanie. No, I guess we should start with Madeline, which I know you are a fan and have a good story about the product-led distribution.
Yeah, so product-led distribution is definitely my favorite. I know Stephanie's favorite is adoption. I love product-led distribution. Why? Because it's basically giving you free marketing and free awareness if used right. And then in the early days, if you can get that right, that can eliminate or at least significantly reduce your need to do paid marketing. And so I'll give an example again in the B2B2C space because that's my favorite. And so we're all on the same page with B2B2C. What I mean by B2B2C is when you're selling a product to a business that's ended up being consumed by their customers, right? So let's take a look at MailChimp, or if anybody listened to Serial, MailCrimp, which is a fun company. MailChimp, I think, has done a really good job at a B2B2C PLG distribution strategy because they've always had a tier where at the bottom of their emails, it says the email is powered by MailChimp. And so what does that mean? It means that when businesses use MailChimp, their end consumers get the email, hopefully experience a nicely laid out email. It's very crisp, clear, good graphics, et cetera. At the bottom, they say, oh, MailChimp, this is MailChimp. So that when they're thinking about an email provider for their own business or their own companies, MailChimp is top of mind. Now, to do the counter argument on that, MailChimp do have tiers where you basically pay to remove that branding. I don't think that's ideal because ideally your PLG distribution is so core to the value delivering customers, and we can talk a little bit about that, those differences in a bit. But yeah, I think it's a good example of PLG distribution and kind of that B2B2C space. How do you raise that awareness in a natural way? And I bet in the early days that really helped MailChimp scale that brand awareness when traditionally they would have to pay a lot on paid marketing.
Good. Yeah. I like it. Next is product-led adoption, and is Georgia, which you have Linktree or you play something else here?
Yeah, well, I think this is so. I think what's interesting and kind of back to the point I was making previously is around kind of who is adopting it and why, right? And I think what we have seen is that suddenly when you have a lot of customers, it's who do you listen to and how do you identify the ones to listen to. So I can't help but plug another company in our portfolio that everyone should check out called Common Room, C-O-M-M-O-N, Room. And a lot of our product-led growth companies work with Common Room. Our customers are Common Room, so the Figmas, the Notions, the Dropboxes of this world. And what Common Room enable companies to do is understand across the different channels and community platforms who are the sort of right customers and right ambassadors for the product. So who of the customers that have adopted this product are the right ones to listen to? Because I think what some companies can find is that it ends up being sort of the tyranny of the minority, right, with some of these adoption curves, that you end up listening to not so valuable customers and therefore building features or building pricing for them. So in terms of understanding who's adopting, why they're adopting, we've seen Common Room be meaningfully good for companies who are going through that.
Nice. Let's get an example from Stephanie about how the product can then once it's landed, how can it expand?
Yeah, absolutely, and I do love distribution. I will mention that, but I just think distribution is the one that we focus on so much because it's what people always think of in the product-led motion, and expansion is near and dear to my heart because I think it's one of the main reasons that Spendesk was actually quite successful. So 40% of the revenue at Spendesk came from spend through the platform. So this meant number of transactions and volume of transactions through the platform. So it was hugely important that it wasn't once the deal was made that you had to continuously to invest into that relationship to really get the full value out of the customer and also for the customer to see the full value out of the platform. And so this is where we invested really heavily in our product-led motion in terms of both lifecycle email marketing, but also really building within the product a spending insights dashboard that essentially educated customers on how to optimize their spend. So as you're pointing out, I think a huge component of product-led growth is making it a feature that is if you ripped it out, completely takes value out of the product. And this was one of the core value features that not only increased usage through the product, increased spend through the product, but allowed users to really just use it without ever having to talk to anyone, where we know that's really a huge blocker, right? When you have to, you want to use more of the platform, but you have to wait to be able to talk to someone. So that was one of the huge investments we made from an expansion perspective.
It's great. It's great. You both three of you have mentioned a few opinionated and intentional strategy, both at product level and at product-led growth level, to maximize the effect, right? So can you walk us through a few ones that have you seen or have you done directly to really boost intentionally with active changes in the product strategy, or how the team works together, how do you configure the growth team, etc. Who wants to start probably on both at distribution, adoption, or expansion? How can you, good tips, good hints, practical for the audience, for the founders here in the audience, how can tweak and make this happen and change dramatically the adoption and the results?
Yeah, I can start. So I think that first of all, I think PLG right now is particularly trendy and buzzy. And so I mentor a lot of startup founders, and they almost always have some kind of PLG buzzwords in their go-to-market slide, usually to satisfy VCs that it's like a tick box activity. Yes, we are doing product-led growth. Why? Because it reduces costs and you can scale cost efficiently. But I think a tip that I always use in my head when thinking about whether we should build a feature that will help with product-led growth is back to the question of, if I removed this feature, would my customers care? And if the answer is yes, they would care, then do it. If the answer is no, they wouldn't care, I would argue that is a growth hack. It's not product-led growth, and growth hacks are great, right? So I think that growth hacking is a discipline in its own right, and it could be a whole panel about growth hacks. But I think they have a very limited time set that they will be effective, and you just have to approach it as such. So something that we do in our team a lot is when we're thinking about a feature that we think will help with growth as part of product-led growth, we ask ourselves, do our customers actually want to use this feature? Will it help them? Is there a job to be done? Is there a problem to be solved with this feature being delivered? And if it's yes, it's an obvious let's do that. If it's no, I would always reconsider it from a product strategy person first, right? And so, yeah, I think that's a question in my mind a lot when we're prioritizing a roadmap and things that we think will help with growth is always put the customer first, always put the problem to be solved first, and then usually, at worst, at least you've delighted your customers, right? And at best, it also helps with growth.
Love it, love it. So if it's not organically embedded in the product experience, you have to think twice before pushing through. Yeah, if it's not solving, I would argue if it's not solving a problem for your customers, either making their own onboarding experience better or making the discovery of your product easier, or all these types of things, and be true to yourself. Look at yourself in the mirror and ask if you're bullshitting yourself on this.
it's a growth hack. It's not product-led growth.
Okay,
in
so
my opinion.
George, as a VC now, we need to have the boxing tick, PLG or grow hack, right? So yeah, more honest.
Growth hacks are great, but it's not, to me, it's not strategic to the product. So therefore, it's going to have a limited life cycle of effectiveness.
George, any great examples where some team you have worked with implemented a change that dramatically changed the growth trajectory of the company?
Yeah. So firstly, I totally agree. I think that typically growth hacks can be unsustainable, and it kind of veils, the underlying either sort of issue with the product or something that it's not nailing. I actually think, Pietro, you used the word kind of what tweaks. I almost feel like if I think about businesses across our portfolio, only really the sort of, you have to get to a certain scale and a certain user base to really have the luxury of tweaking, right? If you're tweaking at such an early stage, arguably you're kind of going down a rabbit hole, for want of a better word, right? You either have product market fit or you don't, and if you don't have product market fit, it's almost like let's focus on that versus sort of micro tweaking some of these things to drive, as Madeline said, unsustainable growth hacks. So I think a lot of our businesses that we're working with are not in a place where they have the luxury of tweaking, and then they get to a certain scale, and of course you can do all these clever things around, either the logo being on things or pop-ups or banners, but yeah, it's almost very, I guess my comment is it's very contingent on the stage that the business is at, and the strategy that they deploy.
Yeah, okay. Maybe it's more in the domain of the growth hack, but I saw a couple of times like really a small change in the user flow where, again, after being a forced consumer of the product, the call to action at the end, like when you receive a typhoon, the call to action that they A/B tested on, okay, how you then can try to turn a consumer in as user. Once you find the right formula, that has been a dramatic and material change in the growth of the company, because if 80 or 60% of your natural growth is organic, and you find the right loop, that is meaningful. Not at the decrement of the product value.
Growth hack.
But I think this growth hack and the, product thinking and product execution, growth and go-to-market, growth hack. Another big, always puzzle, I guess unresolved to date, is the organization inside the company, like where to put the growth hack team inside the product, inside the marketing. Everyone is very opinionated about that. Stephanie, I know you're also very opinionated on org struct and team design, because also Our.Space is your domain. Tell us how you have thought about this. What works best in your experience?
Yeah, no, I'm glad you asked this question. So I love team design. So, I mean, look, I think the initial examples of growth coming out, Slack obviously is one of the best examples, and who had a dedicated growth squad when they're around, 300, because they wanted to create a space for experimentation. And I think in the early days, it made sense to create a siloed organization, but I'll say from my personal experience at both Gusto and at Spendesk, where we both tried to create initially a separate growth organization, I really think it didn't work, because it both siloed kind of the great best practices of experimentation, but also it created a really confusing end-to-end user experience, because even though we're talking about the trifectas as different parts, the user experiences them as one full journey. And so I would say the advice and my recommendation is to have, yes, dedicated engineering, because I think that's the difference when we're talking about like the growth hack versus having it built into the product strategy. But I really think having distributed growth managers is the right move. And whether or not you have a separate growth leader that's like out of marketing or product. I think it depends on the leadership team and skills that you have. But you even see, I think, like Amplitude, who also is one of the best examples. They had a dedicated interim head of growth, but now it's been absorbed and it's spread across to the two teams again. So I guess my takeaway is dedicated engineers, but I really think distributed growth managers, so that it really is created as a full end-to-end experience. I don't know.
Any strong view, in agreement or disagreement on the structure?
About team structure. I think, well, I've most of my working life has been in my own startups, but I have worked at larger companies before, at Skyscanner, and also in pharma. And I think the main thing is, and it's easier said than done, is making sure that product and marketing are completely aligned. Or again, you get divergent on marketing's doing growth hacks. Why? Because they don't have engineers. They try to do quick and dirty things to get the growth that they need. And sometimes product, unfortunately, there's a whole other discussion, can get quite far removed from the business outcomes that actually matter. And so I think that product-led growth definitely needs to be its own squad, and with different product strategies to help boost it up. But yeah, I wouldn't do them divergent. I think that's when you see product-led growth really get missed opportunity, because you're in your own little silos of products, which can be removed from the business outcome, and marketing, which is trying to do things as scrappy as possible to get the numbers that they want.
Okay. In the spirit of time, I want to drop, I know you're not really prep on this, but
Right.
it's by design. So there are actually, so PLG, yes, is new, is always a fashion word, but actually good teams and has been on the playbook of everyone's for many, many years. Two, let's say, new things are happening in our industry, and are very top of mind for any of us. One is businesses have less money for software to date, right? This is across the spectrum, across the verticals. So selling to customers is getting harder and harder. And so we just showed this, one of you picked up this TechCrunch article last week that was about PLG now is dead, right? And I think the too long didn't read was because now there's much more control at customer level on how teams spend money. The dream where a single contributor in a company can take a credit card, buy a software in the pure product-led adoption motion without any approval, and then it expands magically by individual to a team to the entire company, is less credible. So the first question is, how do you guys, have you seen this happening in your experience, your portfolio, like less ability for a product to sell itself and more the need, to get approval, so you need a sales team, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah. Well, I can start because the use case. I think it's so Our.Space. Again, like what we're building is we're creating a platform really for any team to really model out the different scenarios for their team structures, but also everyone else in the company to have a source of truth to know who works on what, because we know that's typically distributed and amassed across many different sources. And so we originally, when we started building the product, fell into a very similar ego to build a product-led growth first motion. And so we wanted to really build it in a place that any team could adopt it in isolation. So engineering manager, a head of design, director of product could really adopt it and then start to spread across. But we've seen definitely with the current economic situation that we're all in, budgets are centralized, therefore decisions are centralized, which means operational folks, I think, have much more weigh in than they did before in being able to use these tools. So we've definitely made a huge pivot in the last 2 quarters to really focus on serving HR and operations leaders, because right now for us, and that's why I mentioned, like, not every part of the PLG needs to be implemented at the same time, as you said, and we've really shifted to have now a sales-led acquisition motion, although our product is still product-led from an adoption and expansion, but because exactly what you said, with the current situation, it's a top-down decision where before there was an ability to do more of a bottoms-up.
Yeah. Georgia?
Yeah, so I think, Index, we're definitely thinking a lot about this, both in terms of the businesses that we are looking to invest in, but also how it's going to impact a lot of our portfolio companies. I think in general, we sort of break AI down into three parts. So it's obviously underlying models, kind of picks and shovels infrastructure, and then application. If I think about application, which is obviously the sort of almost last to feel the effects, one of the earliest places where we're seeing the application drive meaningful change is actually within customer service teams. So the idea that suddenly when you can kind of multiply agents and what within products, what that looks like when you're trying to charge per seat, right? So suddenly some of these pricing strategies that have been used for a long time by product-led growth companies are being sort of called into question in terms of how sustainable they are. On the other hand, I think everything we're seeing is that ultimately, data is the most valuable moat, right? So as long as you are building a moat within the organizations you're servicing, and you have valuable data, that means that they want to continue to work with you and see the value in that, because from that data you can build, new products or new services, then ultimately that becomes the moat and the way to still drive value and to drive, get budget. In a new way.
I think that is we're entering the domain of product-led sales, which would deserve an entire session. But we're entering the thank you. Now I want you to answer the question from the audience. We got 10 minutes. There's any urgent question, please? Because I have only a couple of reserved, so no question whatsoever. Clarification, examples to bring in. Okay, while you're thinking, and I know there's John aware somewhere and in the audience, so please think a question. So my bonus question is on the other thing that is top of mind today, and in a way has changed and is gonna change a lot in how software is built, how software is designed, and how software is sold to companies, which is, guess what? Generative AI, right? So the question I think to think about is, given the product-led growth motion, how generative AI can impact. Does it change things? Accelerate one of the three forces, or is actually neutral? To think about that, my high-level 2 cents at the moment is that generative AI will be quite neutral in the variable loop, like in the product-led distribution. I don't see, I can't imagine any good examples. It will be actually a net positive on the adoption, because of the ability of speed and improve the onboarding through a conversational UI, and because of the ability to port data from one system of record out. So we saw before the great speech before, the example in HR, all the data are stuck into system of record, and so owning the entire suite is a competitive advantage for Rippling. But what if now it's very easy to extract in a structured way data, and so the new product basically has not the barrier to entry they used to have to before. So that is my 2 cents. And finally, for what is in regards to the product-led expansion, I think it will be a net negative, because there will be less people using software, less developer, less seats, because of the automation that we'll bring in. This is my thinking, my mental models. If anyone have a strong opinion, please.
I mean, I'd push back on you slightly on expansion. I actually think that AI and generative AI can do a lot of net positive for SaaS for expansion. Why? I've seen a lot, and even us at PurpleDot, you're always thinking about what is that expansion opportunity? Like what different features can I gate to then upsell a client on? Or how can I figure out the right number of seats to include in this package, et cetera, et cetera. And it's kind of right now, for most companies, it's almost like a one size fits all. Like this is the package that you have for the premium package and for the enterprise package and all these types of things. But I think with generative AI, SaaS will be able to get a lot smarter about slicing and dicing those packages based on the feature set that makes sense for that client. To date, that would be really tricky, right? To slice and dice a different premium package for hundreds of different clients. But I think with AI, you'll see a lot more of this happen with expansion, especially as customers, like you said, are getting tighter with their budgets, right? They're doing these reviews and like, oh, we're paying for this premium package, but we only use this feature, this feature, this feature. So yeah, I think there is a space for generative AI to play in terms of for SaaS companies to be able to adopt it and understand what their expansion opportunities are, and even personalize those expansion opportunities. So that's more of like a usage-based packaging than opposed to just seat-based or a one-size-fits-all. That will make AI will make a lot easier not only to execute it, but to make those recommendations in a way where you're not having so much budget pushback on that expansion.
Nice.
So that's my...
Nice, on pricing, nice. Pricing and packaging, nice. Georgia, what are you thinking?
Yeah, so so I talked a little bit of example of one sort of application where we're seeing it. I think in a lot of our products, in a lot of our portfolio, we're already seeing them implement it with their product, like Notion, sort of pre-populated templates, Linktree, pre-populated bios, and we'll continue to see more of that. I think maybe kind of taking a step back though, it feels like, much like PLG isn't the magic solve all, neither is generative AI, right? And still behind both of those things, one, you still need a fantastic engaging product, and letting kind of AI dictate that strategy doesn't necessarily make sense. Like the product in itself still needs to drive engagement. But B, it goes alongside a lot of different sort of motions and different types of things, like how you think about pricing. Or even in PLG, right? It's like, if you look at a lot of these successful PLG businesses, the Notions, the Figures of this world, they would not be at the scale that they are at without having full kind of enterprise sales teams and having a multiple channel-led go-to-market. Whereas if you look at the counter with maybe something like Dropbox that didn't get to that scale, they were more reliant on solely the product-led growth. So I think maybe the message is, let's not kind of assume that just like PLG doesn't solve everything, neither does AI, and to think about it kind of in context with the rest of the levers that we can pull.
Of course. There is no such a thing as silver bullet in SaaS. I agree. Stephanie, do you have some comments about?
Yeah, I think I would again put AI and PLG in the same bucket, where it's something that you have to consider though, because I think companies who don't consider it, like companies that don't implement product-led growth tactics, again, not at every single stage, I think are the ones that are unrooted. So I think it's going to be the same for AI. And I think particularly, what AI is going to really allow is to allow you to test and experiment ways to bring value much faster to your customers before completely building it. I know that's something that we're playing with a lot right now at Our.Space, and again, I would push back a little bit. I think expansion is definitely one that I see as being a huge play in that, because typically that's really where you rely a lot of the personalization on an individual, and I think the ability for AI to much more quickly actually data model your behaviors and create really tailored messaging is going to be, I think, critical. So I don't have all the answers, and I don't think many of us do, but I think it's it can't be ignored.
Okay. Personally, next year I will change the title. It will be PLG is King and Product is King Kong, which actually I believe. Of course, I'm always product first. And I come up with something about the generative AI, another beast or something that starts with key. I don't know. We need to find the answer. I think we have time for one question, but otherwise, I think we can give an applause to the three panelists. Thank you very much. Oh, there is one question. There we go.
Is this thing on?
Yeah,
Perfect.
it's up.
Wonderful. We've had a lot of some really interesting, diverse opinions on how a product can drive growth and acceptance. My question is, I'm wondering if the difference of perspective is also a difference of interpretation of what a product team does day to day. So maybe I could ask the panel if they can give their opinion about what a product team is responsible for, what they're not responsible for, if there is some diverse opinion on that as well. Is that a clear question?
I think it's about where the product team ownership ends and the growth starts, right? So I candidate Stephanie for a quick answer on that.
Yeah, I think Madeline, this will be a good, I think a hot topic one, because I think that the teams that probably have the most convergence rate is between product marketing, growth, and then product. And so, like, I know this is a super simplified example, but I think the marketing team is responsible for selling the product. The product team is responsible for building the product. But I think the agreement between each one of those is while doing that is creating the correct experience delivered to the customer, and then hitting the business goals that we're all accountable for. And so I think the business goals are very dependent on the business, but overall they're the same types of metrics. And I think the product team, our great product teams have, I would say, metric and customer goal-oriented objectives versus just build objectives. I'm sure maybe you can agree with that. But yeah.
Yeah, just one sentence on, I get this question a lot, like what is product? What is a product team? Product team is solving customer problems aligned to the business outcomes. It's that simple. If you're building stuff that's not aligned to the outcomes, bad. If you're just doing business outcomes, also bad. Customer problem solved, business outcomes achieved, that's product to me.
Excellent. Thank you very much again for your time.
Thank you.